We gather this day because life is sacred. Human life is sacred, and Don's life is sacred to us. It is sacred in its being born, it is sacred in its living, and it's sacred to us even in death. We are here today as family and friends to honor and celebrate Donald George Bagnall's life, for we've come here to give thanks for the way his life and ours connected. A father, a grandfather, a brother, an uncle, and a friend. And we are grateful and extremely more because of his life, and we want to thank him for the gift of his life and all that he gave us. So in the stories and the memories we share today, may we find comfort and peace in knowing that Don, a child of God since his birth, has begun a new journey beyond this world and is held in the deep peace of God. And he is also here with us in our hearts and the love we share. Let us join together in a moment of prayer. O gracious God, we thank you for the gift of life. From the moment of conception and birth to the moment of our last breath, we live amidst the wonder and beauty of all of life and marvel at the gift of what it means to be fully alive and fully human. And today we particularly thank you for the gift of Don's life, a gift to us, to country, and to so many others. We lift up Don's life today. We ask your blessings upon him and each of us. And we entrust Don to you in death as you in life entrusted him to us. For we come with many emotions today, yet we celebrate Don's life in the midst of all of this. And we pray that our continuing memories of him in our hearts be filled with peace and gratitude and joy. Amen. Now I'd like to invite Jerry forward to read our obituary and a family welcoming.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming today to celebrate the life of my father-in-law, Don Bagnall. Don George Bagnall passed away in his home on Monday, May 9th, 2022, at the age of 92 years. He's together again with Roberta, his wife of 55 years. Donald was born to George and Irene Bagnall on March 15th, 1930, in Wilkie, Saskatchewan. Don was the oldest of 11 children, and he is survived by his brothers David and his wife Mickey, Boyd and his wife Kathy, sisters Pat Ball, Shirley and her husband Gary Edwards, Ellen and her husband Peter Kazakov, Gail and her husband Willis Lawton, Dawn and her husband Gary Barber, sister-in-laws Cheryl Bagnall, as well as numerous nieces, nephews, and their families. Don is also survived by his children from his first marriage, Kim, Janice, and Lee. Besides his loving parents, George and Irene, Don was predeceased by his wife Roberta, sister Ruth Smart, brothers Jim and Bill Bagnall, as well as brothers-in-law Bob Frankie and Roy Ball. Don spent his childhood and graduated high school in Wilkie. After graduation at the age of 18, Don joined the Royal Canadian Air Force, where he served for 28 years. It was while stationed in Greenwood, Nova Scotia, that Don met and married Roberta Rossetti. Don was warmly welcomed and loved by the Rossetti family. After retiring from the Air Force, Don and Roberta settled in Lethbridge, where they raised their 3 children, Peter, Eric, and Shelley Bagnall, Wendy, me. Don and Roberta were also blessed with 4 grandchildren, Sarah, Ian, Hannah, and Darian Bagnall. Don was a loving son, husband, father, brother, and a very proud, doting grandfather, and he will be greatly missed.
I of sea and sky. I have heard your people cry, those who dwell in dark and sin, my hand will save. I who made the stars of night, I will make the darkness bright. Who will bear my light to them? Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart.
Thank you, Darian. Darian's Don's granddaughter, and it's really lovely how the family is sharing of their talents and their memories. And now I'd like to invite Eric to begin our time of remembrance and celebration.
That's a bit of a tough act to follow. You have to bear with me a bit here. This past week and a half was a little bit more emotional than I anticipated. Trying to figure out what I wanted to say about my father and put pen to paper, so to speak, or in my case, not quite up to 60 words a minute, but that's a work in progress. 1930 to 2022, that's 92 years. To put that into perspective for you, in 1930, most farms were still using a team of horses to work the land. Gas was 20 cents a gallon, and news and entertainment came via the radio. Today, we're selling private tickets, to private citizens for rides into space. Dad's younger years were dominated by his service in the Canadian Armed Forces. He joined the Royal Canadian Air Force on December 1st, 1948, not long after high school, and retired with the rank of captain 28 years later at the age of 46. That service took him all over Canada, the US, England, France, Germany, and the Middle East. He did 2 tours with the United Nations peacekeeping forces in both Egypt and Pakistan. On January 29th, 2002, Dad was awarded the Canadian Peacekeeping Service Medal, and with that, granted veteran status. I know he was very proud of that because he wasted no time getting down to the DMV and ordering his veteran plates. I always enjoyed getting Dad to talk about his time in the service. It took a little coaxing, but I think he enjoyed telling those stories as much as I liked hearing them. Growing up and as a young adult, Dad was always a bit of a mystery to me. He didn't explain his actions or why he thought the way he did. That's just the way it was. Even in retirement, parts of his life were regimented and squared away. He wasn't like my friends' dads, who were way more laid back. And like most young people, I suspect, I wasn't really interested in learning who my father really was. I just kind of took him at face value. But it was through those stories that I began to get a real sense of who my father was and how much the military shaped the man he became, where he served, who he served with, the experiences he had, and the people he met along the way, the things he saw. His worldview was so much broader than mine, and most people's, I suspect. During his service with the UN in Pakistan, his duties revolved around the airport. In the evening, they would drive back into town to the hotel they were housed in. Rooms and floors were assigned by rank, and each floor had a steward who looked after all their needs. At the end of the week, Dad and his buddies would take up a collection for their steward and make sure he got a little bit extra. As Dad explained, it wasn't a lot of money to them at the time, but it made a tremendous difference to this man and his family. They developed a mutual respect. As Dad said, he was just a father with a job to do and to support his family. Same as us, he said. So he said, we looked after him, and he looked after us. The dining room had been converted into a mess, and as protocol would dictate, the highest ranking officers were to be served first. Only that didn't happen. It was Dad's table that was being served first. And this went on for about a week, much to the displeasure of the commanding officer, who marched over to the table and demanded to know why they were being served ahead of him. In a true military fashion, Dad responded, "It's because we tip better, sir." While the rest of the table desperately tried not to break out laughing. In the mid to late 60s, Dad was one of a group of airmen that was selected to go down to Georgia for factory training on a new aircraft that the Canadian military had purchased. And this was at the height of all the racial tension in the U.S., especially in the southern states. And Dad had said to me, "Do you know we had to go through sensitivity training before we were allowed to go down?" You know, I was confused by that. Why? I said to Dad, "Were they afraid you wouldn't treat the African American population with respect?" And he replied, "No. They were afraid we would be too kind and offend the Southern gentleman." It wasn't just what he said, but it was the way he said it that made it crystal clear to me how he felt about that situation and how much it offended him. About 10 years ago, I was driving Dad up to Calgary for an appointment with a specialist to get his ankles looked at. And it was a warm summer morning, early, and we were enjoying a little bit of quiet time, something that never happened with my mother. A song came on the radio by the Tragically Hip called 50 Mission Cap. And for those of you not familiar with the lyrics, it starts out, Bill Barilko disappeared that summer. He was on a fishing trip. The last goal he ever scored, one Leafs the cup. And this voice beside me says, I was on the search for him. And then he goes back to looking out the window. I'm like, Dad, you can't throw that out there and leave me hanging. I didn't think he was listening, but he was. So he went on to explain to me that Bill Barilko was a defenseman for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And in 1951, the Leafs were playing the Montreal Canadiens for the Stanley Cup. Every game in that series has gone into overtime. In Game 5, Bill Barilko scored the overtime game-winning goal that won the Leafs the cup. So he was a national hero, about as big as it gets in those days. That summer, he went on a fishing trip in northern Ontario with his friend Henry Hudson. On the way back, their float plane crashed into the dense northern Ontario bush. It was all over the news. It made national headlines. And the search for him was the most extensive and expensive search the Canadian military has ever conducted. Basically, every plane they could spare flew low and slow, with airmen lined up on the windows with binoculars, scouring the bush for any signs of where this plane went in. Unfortunately, they didn't find him. That didn't happen until 11 years later. And the next verse in the song was, they didn't win another till 1962, the year he was discovered. So here we are listening to a song on the radio by a popular Canadian band about a little piece of Canadian history. And the man beside me was part of that story. He was full of those little surprises. So it's through those stories and the conversations they sparked, the history he lived and the wealth of experience that he had to share, that I began to appreciate the man the younger me didn't take the time to get to know. He wasn't such a mystery anymore. He taught me a lot of life lessons. A person should be judged by their character, not the color of their skin or their station in life. That hard work and perseverance could overcome most obstacles. A job worth doing is worth doing right. And if you make a commitment, honor it. Some of those lessons were painfully obvious at the time and they stung a little, but that's because they were supposed to. Others were more subtle and didn't have their aha moments till later in life. They were learned by the example he set, the way he conducted himself, how he handled difficult situations, the way he treated other people. Dad was never the loudest person in the room. Instead, he had a quiet kind of confidence, a sharp sense of humor, and he carried himself with dignity and purpose. He didn't amble through life. To amble along, that wasn't our dad. He could have a stern exterior at times, a personality trait that Shelley will probably tell you I've picked up. But underneath that, he was kind and generous, regularly donating to his favorite charities. He was tough but fair, something I see in my sister. And he was respectful. Sometimes heroes aren't always men who do grand deeds. Sometimes they're just the guy who quietly goes about doing what's necessary to provide for his family and raise his children. The guy that always knows the right thing to say in any situation. Words of encouragement when needed, or maybe a swift kick in the seat of the pants. It was that reassuring hand on your shoulder when you suffered a defeat, and that smile beaming with pride when you excelled. But most of all, it was that rock-steady presence, unwavering, always there, always willing to help. That steady hand that guided our family. It's a strange feeling to come to terms that you no longer have parents. It's our turn now. Good thing he set a fine example. So what kind of man was my father? In short, a good one. And we were blessed to have him.
My dad was the old of 11 children. He grew up with a strong sense of family. My dad would joke that after having 10 children, his parents must have ran out of names, as his youngest sister goes by her middle name, Dawn. They were the family bookends, Dawn and Dawn. We had many family trips to Saskatoon or a Bagnall family reunion. We often stayed at my Aunt Ruth's. I think that was Ruth and my dad's effort to keep all the bad apples under one roof. My dad attended school and graduated in Wilkie, Saskatchewan. My grandmother was a school teacher. I imagine she wasn't too pleased with my dad's less than stellar grades in the basics. To his credit, his marks in math and algebra were high 90s, which served him well in his career. We still have every one of my dad's report cards. My dad could make or fix almost anything. I don't remember a service person ever coming into our home for a repair. He built our home stereo. It could blow the windows out of the house. As a boy, he would build stilts with his brother Bill, go-karts, toys for his siblings, and even furniture for his mothers. He would spend hours making kites and model planes, cooking the glue on the family stove, getting the rest of the family high. He once glued his father's walnuts back together after he had emptied them. When myself and my brothers were growing up, we also had a few sets of stilts around. He also kept a bunch of black rubber and a set of shears handy to fashion slingshots for us and the neighborhood kids. How we didn't do considerable damage to ourselves and others is a mystery. Our house was where the kids came to get their bikes tuned up, or in later years to get their car stereos installed. My dad was a wizard with electronics. Those car stereos often had more value than the cars. Eric paid the price for this with stunting tickets for loud music. While in Cold Lake, my dad would flood the backyard with our neighbors, make benches out of snowbanks, and keep it well-groomed all winter long. In Cold Lake, I would have been around 6, making my dad about 43. I remember one time while playing with the neighborhood kids, one of the boys told me my dad was an old goat. I was devastated, certain his days were numbered. The weekend came and my mom had my brother somewhere. It was just me and my dad. On Sunday, Dad got me all dressed and ready for church, but I really wanted no part of it. He said, "Fine, if you're not going, I'll just walk. No need to take the car." I was quite proud of myself. I remember looking out the front window, watching my dad walk down the driveway, and then it hit me. He's an old goat. He'll never make it. I went running out of the house, telling my dad, "Come back, we can take the car." I truly believed I saved his life that day. It never dawned on me that my dad walked everywhere, including to work most days. His office was located in close proximity to the church. We grew up Air Force. I didn't realize my dad's name was Don, not Captain, for quite some time. Well, in the service, my dad used his 6 skills to build massive ice sculptures for the yearly festivities, as it was a healthy competition, with the base being divided into different districts. Along with ice sculptures, he would decorate our float. That involved never being able to watch TV without having without having to fluff flowers for the float. I have fond memories of growing up in the military, even if I have to tell people I was born in Moose Factory, Ontario. As a child, when your mom gets cross with you and says, "You wait until your father gets home," it added an extra layer of fear when your father wore a uniform. In reality, he struggled to punish me as the baby and the girl. I remember him coming into my room, getting my side of the story, understanding I've had a way with words since a very young age. He would then tell me, "Go apologize to your mom. Apologize to your mom and act like you got in a little crap here, Wendy, and don't do it again." Being a little girl, I could really put my brothers through hell. I always had the protection of my dad. We 3 kids could be watching TV in the basement. All I had to do was yell upstairs, "Dad, Peter's hitting me." I would follow that up with a smile for Peter as I delighted in my dad's stern words for him. I really could do no wrong. My dad was my champion, going toe-to-toe with my grade 7 math teacher when I was being disruptive in the classroom. My dad educated him, telling him that if I'm able to disrupt the whole class, then clearly I possess some fine leadership skills. And instead of busting my chops, he should be working with me, as I had the ability to get the class to follow my lead. I had the same smile for that teacher as I used on my brothers. Family vacations for us were piling 3 kids into a Dodge Dart with a 9-man tent and a massive cooler. My dad was a Tetris champ long before the game was invented. We would hit the campground, get our spot, and my brothers and I would immediately scatter. None of us wanted to be around when the tent was going up. We heard a lot of, "Roberta, I said the damn blue pole, not the green one." We would return once it was erected. One such camping trip to Jasper, Alberta included our dog Mitzi. Shortly before we left for camping, Mitzi was tangled in her chain. My dad gave it a yank and broke her leg. She was in a full cast. After having to explain how the dog broke her legs a few times, he resorted to saying she broke it in a skiing accident. Those road trips sometimes involved stopping at a diner for a burger and a milkshake in the tin cup where you got to have the extra to top off your cup. Good times. As a family, Mom cooked every day, and dinner was on the table when Dad walked in the house, which is exactly when he said he would walk in the house. We ate at home. Fast food wasn't a thing. If we went out for dinner, it was an event. One such event was our birthdays. We would go for Chinese food. One year on my 13th birthday, we headed for the restaurant. I really wasn't feeling too well. No bother. My dad said, "Go ahead, you can sleep it off in the back seat." The 4 of them went in the restaurant and feasted on my birthday dinner. There was no missing those meals. They were very special. My dad was a stickler for time. We were never, ever fashionably late for anything. If he said we were leaving at 6, the car was rolling down the driveway at 6, and if you weren't in it, you were hopping into a moving vehicle. If my dad asked pass the salt was expected to be in the air before he finished the sentence. My need for immediate follow-through in my instructions is a trait I most definitely got from my father. My dad was bold and straightforward. He was a man of few words, so when he spoke, we all tended to listen. He was also very kind and generous. My mom would get all the credit for dropping off gifts and decorations for every holiday of the year. She would have him parked outside Toys R Us at 4 a.m. to ensure she was able to purchase Baby Alive, that year's hot item. My dad never begrudged my mom anything. He'd pack a book, sit patiently in the car. He drove the same route with my mom every day for years: Tim Hortons, TD Bank, Sobeys, and home. My dad shopped like a European. Bread came from the bakery, meat from the butcher, and no more than a couple days' supply. Not to say my brothers and I were bad children, but taking 3 of us shopping together was just not a thing. One of us got to be the chosen child to do a grocery run. That meant you got to pick the cereal. Good times. I remember many abandoned shopping carts as a child. Anything we did as a child, we were often reminded, what you do is reflected on your father's service record. If we misbehaved, we got 2 words: let's go. Then the death march to the car. Nothing else mattered. My dad was the driver for everything in our younger years. It was Dad we called to pick us up from the bar. Even my friends called my dad. He did it with a smile on his face. I think he secretly enjoyed the rather loud, unguarded, alcohol-fueled conversations we had on the way home. It was during these times that I repeatedly attempted to make it out of the house for a night out without running across my dad. To get out of my bedroom and out the side door, I would have to pass through the kitchen. My dad never sat in the kitchen, but without fail, as I tried to make my exit, he would be there, and he'd say, "Where do you think you're going?" "Oh, just meeting friends." "Not like that, you're not. Turn around, put more clothes on, and chisel off half your face." My dad is most likely the reason I'm comfortable without makeup today. My dad was a good provider. I don't ever remember going without. We kids took turns going to Nova Scotia for summers. My mom was able to visit often. My dad took careful consideration and did his homework before making a large purchase. He only bought the best quality product, and it lasted. Didn't hurt that he was meticulous about maintenance being performed regularly. My mom kept every birth announcement, wedding invitation, and picture she ever received. My dad kept every receipt, service record, bill of sale, and document that contained his name. After my mom passed, my dad moved into the View retirement home, a few doors down from his buddy Ralph, his neighbor of 35 years. My dad was in his 80s by then, and he suffered from some ankle pain, having had surgery on both ankles at 79 and 80. I asked him to use a walker, but he insisted he didn't need a damn walker. He'd wait for Ralph to swing by, pick him up for meals, and walk behind Ralph's wheelchair and hold it for support. He finally relented and started using a walker, but he's stubborn and considered it a sign of weakness for quite some time. He said meal times at the View looked like the Indy 500 with all the walkers lined up. He also complained right up until his passing that where he lived, there was nothing but a bunch of old people. I don't think my dad ever thought of himself as old. He never lost his appetite. His handshake was still an iron grip. I've seen people wince when my father shook their hand. He was very structured and disciplined his whole life. When he gave up driving, I'd swing by, pick him up. I wasn't the kindest. I drove a Hummer followed by a lifted Jeep. He'd chuckle as he hopped on the step stool to get in my ride. We'd hit the barber every few weeks, and my dad outlived more than one barber. Regular trips to the dentist. He had all of his own teeth and a full head of hair. He never wore shorts and stayed out of the sun. I would kill for a set of legs as nice as my father's. I always knew I had my father's love. He showed me in every way. He wasn't one for speaking the words, but showing through his actions. When my kids would say, "I love you, Grandpa," he would say, "Thanks," or yeah. When Hannah was about 8, she asked me if Grandpa was sick. I said, "No, he's fine." She said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, he just told me he loved me." It was like the dam broke. After that, he never failed to say how much he loved us and how much he appreciated everything I did for him. I told him it was my pleasure, and I'd want it no other way. I'd visit him most days, ensure he had ample snacks. My mom always kept a 6-pack of beer in the fridge for me, but wouldn't buy my dad Lay's potato chips unless they were on sale. My dad quit buying me those 6-packs, but you'll see more than one photo of him on his couch where there's clearly a bag of chips visible next to him. Priorities. My dad always told me as a woman, don't count on a man to make your own way in this world. If you meet a man and marry for love, good for you. If not, you need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. Advice I've given to my own daughters. I couldn't have asked for a better father. I love you, Dad.
I'm trying to hold my breath, let it stay this way. Can't let this moment end. You set off a dream in me, getting louder now. Can you hear it echoing? Take my hand, will you share this with me? 'Cause darling, without you, all the shine of 1,000 spotlights, all the stars we steal from the night sky will never be enough. Never be enough. Towers of gold are still too little. These hands could hold the world, but it'll never be enough. Never be enough for me. Never, 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 never for me, for me. Never enough, never enough, never enough for me, for me, for me. All the shine of 1,000 spotlights, all the stars we steal from the night sky will never be enough. Never be enough. Towers of gold are still too little. These hands could hold the world, but it'll never be enough. Never be enough for me. Never, 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 never for me, for me. Never enough, never, never, never enough, never, never, never enough for me, for me, for me.
My name's Sarah. I'm Dawn's oldest grandchild. I just wanted to share a few little memories just looking back on some of the moments that I shared with my grandpa growing up. Just some of my favorite kind of funny moments that I got to know a little bit more about my grandpa. So first one, when we lived in Coaldale, Grandpa and Grandma came to pick me up one day. I remember it was winter and the roads were icy, and we got into a small accident leaving. Somebody hit the back of the vehicle, and we spun around the intersection a few times. And I remember getting out of the vehicle, and Grandpa was talking to the driver in the intersection and was visibly shooken up. And I remember I kind of went up to him. I said, "Grandpa, can you get back in the car so we can do that again? Do whatever trick you did, and let's do it again." And I don't think he thought that was very fun. Grandpa also took me on a lot of road trips. Back in the days of being an only child. This was also when I learned that Grandpa was often right about everything. One trip was when me, him, and Grandma went to the Royal Tyrrell Museum. We stopped at A&W on the way out of town, and Grandpa tried to order me a baby burger. And I was very adamant that I could eat and finish everything on a teen burger if he'd let me have it. And he kept on saying no. He's like, "Sarah, you're going to vomit in the back seat if you try and eat an entire meal." And Grandma, of course, started sneaking me onion rings and bites of her burger on the side, and I definitely ate way too much because Grandpa was right, as he was about most things, and I threw up in the back of his military spotless vehicle. So we were on the side of the highway cleaning it out along the way there. And probably one of my favorite stories about Grandpa. I remember being very little, maybe 5 or 6, and I said, "Grandpa, how on earth do you get your hair to grow straight up? Like my hair grows down, I don't get it." And I said, "How does it stay that way?" And he told me, he's like, "Well, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is I go to the mirror and I yell at my hair for 10 minutes. And it listens to me and it stands up." He's like, it grows down. I wake up and it's down. I have to yell at it every morning or it won't stay straight up. And I think I believed him for an unreasonable amount of time. I was saying to Dad this morning, he's like, "You can't tell people that you believed them for that long." And I said, honestly, I was probably 10 or 11 before I actually figured it out that that's not how it worked. When I moved to Nova Scotia a couple years ago, Grandpa learned how to FaceTime with Mom's help. It always took a bit to get going because for the first minute he was often looking at his own screen saying, "Who's that ugly bugger?" and critiquing his looks. Which makes sense because I think that's how FaceTime works, is that you're looking at your own screen. So he figured out how to work FaceTime pretty quickly. So that was a nice time for us to communicate with me not being present. I can speak for me and my cousin and siblings that we're very lucky that we had our grandpa into our adulthood. I appreciated my grandpa's love for learning, exploring how the world worked, and his travels. His stories of his time in Wilkie, or his peacekeeping tours, explaining the ins and outs of politics and history that I'd only ever read about in school. He encouraged us to be active and outdoors, sledding in the coulees, making us stilts, going for walks, and getting dragged around in the wagon. He helped foster my love for learning and asking questions about everything. I will always cherish our time together, and I'm very happy that I'm able to be here to celebrate his wonderful life with everybody. I also have a poem by Christina Rossetti called "Let Me Go." When I come to the end of the road and the sun has set for me, I want no rights in a gloom-filled room. Why cry for a soul set free? Miss me a little, but not for long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember the love that once we shared. Miss me, but let me go. For this is a journey we all must take, and each must go alone. It's all part of the master plan, a step on the road to home. When you are lonely and sick at heart, go to the friends we know. Laugh at all the things we used to do. Miss me, but let me go.
For those of you who do not know me or may not recognize me, it's been so long since some of you have seen me. My name is Hannah, and I'm Dawn's youngest grandchild. I practiced this like 4 times and never cried. Now I'm up here and here we go. Whew. I think we can all agree how lucky we are to have known Don in some capacity. Whether you may be family or a friend, he impacted all of us greatly. For my whole 21 years of life, my grandpa and I have never once had a serious conversation. Ever. So I apologize for all the jokes in advance, but I invite you to laugh. But I've made it my life's mission to make my grandpa laugh, and today is no different. I'd like to say my grandpa and I had a pretty goofy relationship, even on the days where he struggled and he would see me, he would look at me and laugh, and sometimes shake his head. This was pretty routine for our relationship. I would make a joke, he would call me weird, and we'd laugh. Grandpa was a person who made me feel like my quirks, uniqueness, and yes, even weirdness were some of my best qualities. I don't think I've had a conversation with my grandpa where I didn't make him chuckle, and I do pride myself on that fact. The last photo I have of my grandpa sums up our relationship to a T. It's a photo I took where he was in the hospital, and it's a side profile view of the longest eyebrow hair I've ever seen in my life hanging over his glasses. Shortly after the photo was taken, it took little to no persuading to let my dad and I try to yank that wiry hair out. We were successful in this endeavor, and we all had a good laugh together. Even during that time when his memory wasn't all there and he didn't know exactly who I was, we were still able to laugh with, or maybe even at, one another. Even by the end, we were still able to maintain our goofy Grandpa and Hannah relationship. Looking back on memories with Grandpa, I see myself smiling, laughing at the times where we would joke and compare our hairy arms and how we could probably braid them together. I'd still like to say I win in the hairy arm department, but I know he would still argue me on that. Grandpa never failed to poke fun at me for my piercings or tattoos. I remember when I came home from Calgary, where I was completing my practicum for college, and met my mom and Grandpa at Tim Hortons after I had just got my nose pierced. Before he even said hello, he told me he could tie a rope to my nose and walk me around like a bull, and proceeded to grab the nose ring, wiggle it, and laugh. Grandpa would always ask me if my tattoos would wash off. He'd lick his thumb and make sure to rub my arm aggressively hard. However, he never failed to turn it into a compliment. In fact, he asked me if I modeled for the tattoo on a woman's face on my arm because she was so beautiful. Well, my tribute tattoo for Grandpa is booked in for next week. Some big Air Force wings across the forehead. He can't rub that off now, can he? He never failed to inflate my ego, always coming to my soccer games, even through my time playing with the college, rain or shine, playing or riding the bench. He still made sure to tell me I did a good job. Not many can say that their grandpa lived to be 92, but I can, and that's pretty great. I am filled with so much joy, and I am forever thankful for the fact that my grandpa was able to be with me for so much of my life and my big milestones: high school graduation, college graduation, getting a good job, moving out of my parents, and being able to meet my amazing boyfriend, and Grandpa making sure to tell my mom what a nice farm boy he is, and meeting my 2 beautiful children, Stevie and Freddie. My cat children. I want to wrap up my little speech by reflecting back to the poem my cousin, brother, and myself read at our grandma's funeral titled If I Knew. I'm not a very religious person, but I am sitting with the feeling of comfort knowing that in some way, somehow, somewhere, Grandpa and Grandma are together again. So I'm going to share with you my favorite part of the poem. I invite everybody to look at who they're sitting beside and give them a hug, tell them you love them, give them a handshake or a simple smile. Because as the poem reads, tomorrow is not promised to anyone young or old alike, and this may be the last chance you get to hold your loved ones tight. So if you're waiting for tomorrow, why not do it today? For if tomorrow never comes, you'll always regret the day that you didn't take that extra time for a smile, a hug, or a kiss, and you were too busy to grant someone what turned out to be their last wish.
When I think about all that has been shared about Don today, I'm reminded of a reading by Lida Rolette, a social worker who works with terminal cancer patients and their families. And she writes this: if there's any real purpose for any of us, it's to somehow enhance each other's humanity, to love, to touch other lives, to put others in touch with basic human emotions, to know that you have made even one life breathe easier because you've lived. By and large, the meaning of a person's life gets distilled to this: how well have I loved? A person then can find hope in believing someone loved me and I love them, and those memories that were created by our love are carried forward and shimmer into the world and beyond. This is what we celebrate today as family and friends about Dawn, this love that's been created, and love can never die. We carry it in our hearts and in our families, and we give it away to each other. So let's join together in a moment of prayer. O gracious God, today we remember with deep gratitude and love Don's life. We thank you for the ways his life and ours were intertwined, and we're thankful for his care, his support, his vigor for life and work, his precision timing, his quiet, ageless presence and dry sense of humor, for all the wisdom he imparted to us, integrity and morals and respect and dependability, non-judgmental nature. And we thank him for his service and sacrifice to country and how he treated us and those he was with. But most of all, we're thankful how family was so important to him and all his care and love of family. We remember in him all that was generous and kind, for the love he gave and received to each one of us. And we pray that he knows our gratitude and thanks for his life, and that we always hold him in our hearts. May the love in our hearts join all of us here, family and friends, together in richer ways than before. And may we know that Don and Roberta's spirit is always with us. Don's love for us and ours for him will never die as we give thanks for the life he has given us. And give us strength and courage in the days ahead, that we might be open to this miraculous gift of life and be in service to this gift and share the best qualities of life that Don has given us. Amen. Following our service here today, the family would like to invite all of you to stay here for a reception that will be held here in Martin Brothers Riverside Chapel and continue to share with them this day. Don is at rest and peace, and may we know that and experience his life and love go with us, locked safely in our hearts and treasured deeply there. And may all of us find peace today. May God bless us and keep us. May God's face shine upon us and be gracious to us. And may God look on each and every one of us and give us kindness this day. Amen.